Tennessee Republican Senator McCamey joins us now from Knoxville. Senator, the question on America's mind right now is reauthorize or reject the No Child Left Behind Act. How do you answer this question?
Well, I really don't feel like the question is whether to reauthorize or reject. I feel like we need to reform education policy in general. I feel like there's some key essential items that the Education Committee needs to touch on. I think we need to focus more on a lean curriculum for all of our students. And I think we also need to pay special attention to making our students more globally competitive with our competing countries that we are dealing with, because I feel that the global economics and the global education standards that we are up against are slightly more raised than what our students in the United States are accustomed to.
It is very clear that the NCLB Act needs revision. What suggestions do you support for an effective policy?
I think that with the NCLB, we need to take a step back and have a more holistic approach to education. I think we need to focus on making sure that every student graduates very much well-rounded. I understand that not every student is going to be a math genius, and not every student is going to be an NFL major star when he or she grows up. But I do think that there are certain standards that need to be met by every student, and that is what the federal government, that's what their role is in the new education policy. I think that we need to take away some of the earmarks that were a part of NCLB, really fulfilling more of a promise to a company here or there, or an interest group. I think that we need to try and step back and put the focus more on the children as opposed to the business world, because once we get the focus back on the students and back on the children, then the business world will reap those benefits later on after we see a generation that has a better and a more wholesome education. And if we put the focus on that, then I think that the future benefits will just be phenomenal.
A big issue that will surely be discussed in debate is whether, under NCLB, states are given their rightful amount of freedom. Do you feel like the Act should give states more flexibility?
Yes, I do feel like that the Act should give more flexibility to the states. I feel that when it comes to education, there should be certain standards set by the federal government, and then with full, we should support the school systems, give them as much funding as possible, making sure that their resources and their needs are met. But then I think that we need to leave the educating to the state. Tennessee education is going to be far different from California education. The population is different. The diversity is different. Everything, all the elements that are composing the school system are vastly different than the other states, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing that we have the diversity. But I feel that the education policy that we're currently working on needs to kind of have a kind of step back a little bit in that regard and make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students, but also letting there be freedom to let the individual states put their own interests and their own needs into the curriculum for our students.
Many Democratic leaders believe an important revision needs to be made on funding. Would you consider an alternative funding policy?
I do agree that a focus that we need to have with the next education mandate that comes from the legislature is funding. However, I do not feel or agree with some of the Democratic standpoints in regards to education funding.
Another key senator in the NCLB reform, Democrat New Mexico Senator Bethany Tibbs, stated, "Dividing the funding equally among schools without regard to privilege would greatly improve the NCLB Act." Do you agree with this claim?
With all due respect, I tend to disagree on this point. I feel that funding, while there should be some equality in funding among the states, I'm not opposed to having some standards where funding is competitive. I want to make sure that all the needs are met of all the schools, of course. But I feel that if there are certain schools who are willing to go above and beyond in order to receive extra funding so that they can have laptops for all of their entering freshmen in a certain school district, then I feel like programs like that should be established, and that the government should work to eventually have those programs available. So in answer to your question, no, I do not feel like the funding should be mandated a certain amount for every school district. I feel like the needs need to be met, and that needs to be a primary focus. But I feel like funding needs to be available for those school districts who are willing to, exceed the expectations and hopefully inspire new ideas and new standards for for their school systems.
Senator McCamey, we thank you for your time today and joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We will continue to follow developments in this story. As for now, I'm Chelsea Stanfield, and this is Fox News.